Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanny and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Yes, we're good, thank you.
No news in the minor break that we just had?
I've got some.
Okay.
Good.
It might turn into a bit of a story, but anyway. So we're currently in the valley in the frogging hour. Now, Schmitty, we spoke about frogging once before, whereby somebody secretly lives in another person's home.
Yes.
Like in what they call crawl space.
In the walls, yeah.
I couldn't remember what it was, so I Googled frogging, and I also found out that frogging is the term used when you make a mistake in your knitting and you have to pull it all out.
Is it?
Apparently because you say rip it, and it sounds like a frog saying ribbit, ribbit. But then also frogging without a PH, because PH is when you live in the house, frogging with an F is going out on as many dates as you can in order to find your prince. After they both recently broke up with their boyfriends, Mary and Nancy decided they needed to go frogging.
That's
not
sweet.
dogging.
Anyway.
Not to be confused with dogging.
Neither of those, that's right. Neither of those are what goes on in the frogging hour here. We are getting invaded by frogs at the moment. So they all start calling crazily. So if there's a strange noise during the podcast that sounds a little bit like predator, because we call them predator frogs because they sound a bit like predator, that's what it is.
Okay. I like it because remember when we had that big drought that went on for felt like 10 years? I didn't hear frogs for years.
Yes.
And then when the rain came finally, or it was just a better season, I remember being at someone's wedding down in the Mornington Peninsula, and I must have seemed like a complete mad bitch because I was out on a deck somewhere, probably having a dart, and I turned to the person next to me and said, "Can you hear that? Frogs." And they just thought, okay. And I thought, well, you obviously didn't grow up listening to frogs and thinking it was pretty weird when we didn't have them. They'd all come back.
I love frogs, don't get me wrong, but
and the frogs in your spa are very cute. Yeah. Your spa frogs. Oh no, your pool frogs. Sorry, the pool.
Well, they're both. They're in the spa. Yeah, even if you put chemicals in the spa. I haven't
experienced that, but I've certainly experienced them around the pool and gone.
Yeah.
Oh, look at a little froggy woggy. Look at a cutie.
It's literally like there's a bazillion of them at the moment, and they're all talking to each other.
Okay. All right. Swanny.
Yes.
Yes.
Same as.
You didn't seem very engaged on the phone.
Continuing on.
I haven't got there yet. Shall we introduce ourselves? I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanny.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial by Wine. And what are we drinking, Swanny?
I'm kicking on with this bottle of
San
Pellegrino.
Yep. Very refreshing. Or not, according to the face that you just pulled.
Yeah.
And boys, are you still on the Tingo Tango Tintos?
No, we're having the rarest kind of wine in our house.
Zero alcohol.
No wine?
No, because we are still having our alcohol-free week. We're having leftover wine. I found a bottle on
your definition of alcohol-free week, I love.
It had about this much in it, and I thought, we may as well polish that off. We're not opening another bottle, so yeah, it's
fair enough.
It's Big Red Duck, which is the one that we make in Copenhagen.
And I
what about you?
Another, well, actually, the same one, not the same one. This is 1.5. I'm halfway through a second hard-rated alcoholic lemon lime drink brought to you by Asahi. And Asahi, if you would like to sponsor us, you can hit us up at trialbywine.gmail.com.
Schmitty, I don't know how you got onto your second one because I barely saw you take a sip because you were doing that last story, but that's some skills you've got.
In fairness, I think I started the first one about 5 minutes before we started. And when I say started, I had a couple of sips. But no, I sipped all the way through, but there were times where you were talking about things and I went glug, 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 glug.
Glug. Yeah. Nice.
Glug, glug, glug.
Only kidding. And, so in our last episode, I mentioned a dead cat story, and then I never got around to telling you it. It's not really that interesting, but I was cleaning out the Indigenous Education Centre. Oh, I should cut that. I was cleaning out an office that I work where I work, and there were 22 years of files in this office, and amongst a whole other lot of detritus that had just been building up, and they were replacing furniture and stuff. So it was a big clean out, and I had bins and bins. The cleaners were getting annoyed with me because I didn't have enough bins for all of the, what do they call it, like the confidential document stuff that we had to get rid of, let alone all the rubbish. And oh my God, so many document wallets and folders and shit like that. Anyway, so I got rid of all of that. And then I went back the following week and someone said, "What's that building around the back?" And I thought, I don't know what she's talking about. So I went around the back and there was a shed there that I didn't even know existed.
Oh, how many skeletons?
I rang security and I said, "Can you get me access to the shed? I'd like to see what's in it because it's all part of this." It had a lot of gardening stuff in it and had a big barbecue and various stuff. So okay. So I made a note of who I needed to contact to see if they wanted to take any of it before I throw it all out. And then there's this section between the shed and the main building, which is fenced off. And behind it is a big water tank. And I said to the security guard, "Could you open that?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't know. I could give it a go, but it's locked. It had a padlock on it." He said, "I haven't opened it in the whole time I've worked here. And I've been here 15 years or something." And I said, "Okay, but open it." But before he opened it, I looked down, and in most fences and a gate, there's a little cutout bit for your hand to go in to pull the bolt out. I looked through the little cutout bit, and directly in my line of sight was a desiccated dead cat. I don't know how long it had been there, but I'm going to hazard a guess of maybe a couple of months. So there were no more flies around it, and it didn't smell or anything. But it still had fur on it, but it had little teeth poking through and sort of slightly skeletal. Anyway, he opens up the area, and as I walk in, 2 feral cats come out of nowhere and disappear, scuttle off, and I'm like, okay. And then I found a dead rat also, and I'm not sure whether or not. Well, I'm not sure whether or not the dead rat, if I had my forensics kit, I could have tested it for poison because I made them put more poison in the office about 2 months ago. And so there's this dead rat which looked roughly as dead as the cat. And I thought, oh, God, don't tell me I killed a rat or I poisoned a rat and then the cat ate the rat. I know an old lady who swallowed a fly. As someone said, they were both roaming free and they were both feral. So, and I still felt a twinge of guilt. But then I don't actually know if that's what killed the cat and or the rat. So what's your story, Swanny?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. First of all, I'm going to tell you my sources and then I'm going to share my little story with you. Okay, so my sources are the New York Post, Wikipedia, although very disappointing, I've got to say, weak. I hate that when that happens. Yes. I always like it for a bit of structure.
I've got to say the wiki for my last case was pretty weak too, yeah.
Well, this one's, I don't think I've ever used it. Weak. Esquire. Ooh. I don't know if you call it Esquire Magazine or Esquire.com, I guess Esquire.com. The DailyMail.com. The Mansfield News Journal, and a little piece I found called The Case of Collier Landry. But anyway, we will come on to that. So they are my sources. And to start this story, I want to take you directly to, we'll call it the point of impact. So if you could just imagine for a moment, it is New Year's Eve, December 31, 1989. So quite similar in terms of timing to your crime. When you started to say the time before, I was like, I wonder if it's going to be the same one. Okay, so as I said, New Year's Eve, 1989. And you are an 11-year-old boy tucked up in your bed in your home, and you are suddenly awoken by a shrill but short scream at 3:15 a.m. And you come to, and sort of immediately after that, you hear 2 loud thuds. So not dissimilar to that. And as I said, you're 11 years old in your bedroom.
Now, I'm just going to say this, Swanny, that you're building a very atmospheric story right now about this child. And I know we were pre-warned, but if that's the frogs in the background, it does sound from where I'm sitting like monsters are coming to kill you two.
As opposed to just...
I just keep hearing this. I'm like, Jesus, it's worse than a possum.
Yeah, they're bad.
Can
you hear
Did you say it only goes for an hour though? Or they do it all night?
We're normally asleep by then. So, I mean, they do it all night, but there's about an hour where they're just terrible.
They're chatty Cathys, but it's very atmospheric.
Okay.
Like little aliens.
Yeah, it's nice music to sleep by.
Sorry, go on.
That's right. Okay.
Sorry, we hear thump thump.
So he's woken by 2 clear, loud thuds. He is paralysed with fear.
As he would be.
And, he's just in his bedroom not knowing what to do when he starts to hear footsteps.
Oh, and God, no, this is a horror.
Counts 11 footsteps coming towards his bedroom.
Oh, no.
And then he feels a man standing in his doorway. So he pretends that he's asleep because he thinks, oh, my God, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I'm in danger and I know I can't move. And if I know that if I show that I'm awake, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. So who was at the door? Who had this young boy absolutely terrified after hearing a scream and 2 loud thuds in his own home?
Was it Santa Claus running a week late and he fell down the chimney?
No, alas, no.
It's more like
it was Krampus. No, they weren't German. No, it was not Santa Claus. It was his father. Correct.
We've been doing this shit for way too
long enough.
Yeah.
And the young boy had enough intuition to know that nothing good would become from showing him that he was awake and had heard that. So little Collier Landry remains frozen. And for several hours, like he
How
just
old was
is.
He again?
He was 11 years old.
Oh my God!
So this is New Year's Eve.
This is your father. You shouldn't be thinking my father might be about to hurt me. Oh my
1989 God. Into 1990. So it's actually the morning of New Year's Day. Actually, this happens. Okay, so we're going to park that there. That is where we start. But where are we? I haven't told you that. Let me tell you. This story is set in Mansfield, Ohio. And Mansfield, Ohio is in between. It's equidistant sort of from Cleveland, Ohio and Columbus, Ohio, which you've probably heard of. They're the big sort of population centres in the state of Ohio. And the capital is Columbus. So if you were driving from one, you'd go through about midway through Mansfield. So it sits within Richland County and it's a really white area. I couldn't find anything particularly interesting about it one way or the other. I think back in 1989, it was a real sort of community and it had been a steel town. So it becomes less so and certainly is less so now. I think it's really part of a rust town, but it was a steel working town. Not huge.
Steel's not supposed to rust.
No, but you know they call it. They call it the rust.
Yeah.
The rust corridor, not the rust corridor. The rust. I don't know. Anyway, so it had a bit of heavy industry and steel. And it was just a pretty simple place to live and grow up, and there's nothing terribly remarkable about it. However, there was a very charismatic doctor called Dr. John F. Boyle Jr., who went by the name of Jack. So Jack Boyle or John Boyle, same person. And he was certainly the most successful physician in town, and he had the largest practice in Mansfield. And in fact, at the time, 1 in 13 people were one of his patients. He saw that many people. He was very well respected, and he and his family were looked at as being pretty special. His wife was his high school sweetheart, and her name was Noreen, and she was always immaculately groomed. So they sort of gave off this sense of the kind of people in town who had it all going on. He was intelligent, charismatic, had patients that liked him, a successful practice, a beautiful and well-groomed wife, and 2 gorgeous children. So he had a son who was, I don't even know how to describe this boy. He had these incredible bluey-green eyes, and he's just the picture of a 1980s child. If I was John Hughes and I was casting a film, which he did often, you would put this child in one of those films. He has, a bit of sass, a bit of attitude, very beautifully spoken, this sort of really blunt sort of haircut, collared shirts with jumpers and very well presented. Just a really I don't know. It looks like he's a cross between something, like a Ricky Schroeder meets Jason Bateman, that kind of thing, 11-year-old, but, really approachable, would speak to adults, would just be the kind of child who everyone would know about. Do you know what I mean? He just was that kind of really open little boy. And then there was also a little sister, and the little sister had been adopted, and only fairly recently. Now, there's very little information on where she was. Well, there's no information on where she was adopted from. She was Asian. I just don't want to say where she was from because I don't actually know.
Yeah.
And it's not anyway. And so her name was Elizabeth, and the little boy's name is Collier. So this family of 4 is outwardly presenting as having it all kind of going on, smiley, well-connected, successful people, kind of the cream of the crop in their town. But I don't think that what you could see externally was what was going on at home. And Dr. John, or Jack Boyle, as he was also known, was a bit of a rageaholic. So he was the kind of father who would come home and have a very quick temper. So if he was having a go at Noreen or Collier, he would really lose his rag. And, there's an example where Collier was saying that he was playing video games. His dad didn't like it. So not only does he say, you can't do that, have a bit of a fit. And don't get me wrong, as a parent, and you have seen me crack it, it was that. But then, he'd throw things around the room. He was just volatile.
Anger management.
And heading into sort of violence, yes. Not necessarily hurting people, but very much psychologically sort of torturing them and, saying terrible things and making people feel bad. And, he used to give Collier a terrible time about his weight.
When you say making people feel bad, his family. Because
his own family.
Very well-respected doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So within his own home, he would return home and...
He's a prick.
He was exactly. A real prick.
Yeah.
I'm all this out there, but back here, you've done the wrong thing. You're not good enough. You're fat. Just awful. And he would apparently say things to Collier like, you're a stupid little fat boy. And then he'd want him to repeat it back to him. And God. I've seen him speak when he's young, and he'll speak, and he'll say, he'd say, "You're a stupid little fat boy." He'd say, "I'm a stupid fat boy," and he said, "Well, in actual fact, there was lots of swearing as well." He said, "But I just wouldn't say that as, a child. Whereas I'm telling you now, he'd call me a pussy, and he'd say this, that, and the other, and all these things that were highly inappropriate to say to a child." And he was saying it to me, and here he is, this respected physician within the Mansfield community, absolutely giving it to us at home. And also, probably not unsurprising for someone who rated himself so highly, he was also known as being
a womanizer,
prone to infidelities. Yes, shall we say. Yeah.
Nailed it. Yeah.
And that may have been something that had been talked about in the wider community. Maybe rumours here and there and a little bit of chat. Nothing terribly... Like people, it wasn't going to stop people going and seeing him as a doctor or whatever else. But I guess they thought he was this, handsome, accomplished man. Why would he?
Had he actually had affairs, or was just
correct? He had.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he had.
Boy, don't try to front. No, just what you are. Boy, don't try to front.
Yes, the more confident he became with affairs and whatever else. At one point, he actually was with one of the ladies he was having an affair with when he had Collier with him, and. There is a quote, and Collier quotes this. I've seen him I've heard it, the quote. I think it was actually in some testimony. He talks about the day that he met this lady, and he says they walk out into a room or out of the car or whatever else, and Jack Boyle, his father, sees this woman. He goes, "Well, look who's here.
Deirdre
Chambers.
It's
a total Deirdre Chambers moment." So Collier doesn't know who she is. He sees her, says, "Oh, hello, my name's Collier." Whatever. She says, "Hi, I'm Sherry." And he says he notices immediately that Sherry has the identical ring that his mum has. And so he says, "Oh, do you know what? That ring that you have, my mother has the same ring."
Oh, no.
And apparently Sherry giggled.
Oh.
Anyway, so young Collier is not having it. He knows. So Collier goes back to his mum and says, "Mum, I need you to sit down. I've got some terrible news to tell you, but I need to tell you something. I don't want to upset you, and I know it's going to, but I think someone has to tell you. I think Daddy's got a girlfriend."
She's like, one.
And apparently Noreen's like, no shit, Collier.
Sherlock.
She's sort of like, yeah, really. But that's the last straw for her. She has known about his infidelities.
Yeah, it's one thing, but when it's in front of your kids, it's another.
You've got my 11-year-old son, you know, playing happy families or whatever you want to call it. This woman's got the same ring as me. Enough. So it's at this point that Noreen says, right, I need a divorce. So at this point, they've been married for about, I've read 20 and 22, so let's say 20 plus years. And she cites, what does she cite? I'd written it down because one of the things I had...
Adultery?
No, it was the way it was worded I hadn't heard before. Let me just see where I had written it down.
Certainly wasn't irreconcilable differences then because we never stopped.
One of them is, oh, here we go. Extreme mental cruelty.
Yes, I have.
And gross neglect, and extreme mental cruelty were the two reasons she put forward for their divorce. And that was mid to late 1989. So this was all happening at that back end of 1989 before the New Year's Eve situation that I was bringing to you at the beginning. So I've set the scene. We're in Mansfield in the house of Noreen and Dr. John or Jack Boyle and their children, Collier and Elizabeth. The scream we hear at 3:15 is actually little Elizabeth, this little girl who's like 3 years old. She has screamed, and that is what has initially woken Collier up. Now, we know Collier is a pretty savvy kind of aware child, telling, Mum, I need you to sit down. And the way he describes it is he said that his father was always at work, always out, never at home anyway. So he and his mum had this incredible relationship with, yes, they were mother and son, but he said, you know, she was my best friend. We were companions. We used to do everything together. I adored my mum. And the photographs of them together are gorgeous. Like they really are, you know, just hanging out together, doing lots of wonderful things you do with your mum. Me and Alex, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Well, he's got to that age now.
Yeah, no one wants to hang out with me anymore. No one wants to listen to me. No one wants to do
when
anything.
He was 12, he would hang out with you. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm like, oh, God, persona non grata around here. I was actually thinking, they were saying to me the other day that I looked upset or angry or something. And then one of the children was trying to talk to me to try and work out what was going on, whether they were in trouble or what was it. And I was honestly just thinking, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered playing your game. So I just sat there quietly and I could see them going, what's going on with her? I was like, oh, you know, you all ignore me all afternoon. They'll come home from school. I'll be trying to talk to people, ask them questions. Nothing. Zero. Can you do this? No. And then when they want to speak to me, and I give them like a little bit of, what, now you want to speak to me? They're like, oh, my God, I don't know what to do with that. Anyway, probably didn't need to go down that rabbit hole. I apologise.
Speaking of psychological nut punching, yeah.
Absolutely. So back to New Year's Eve. So dear Collier is frozen in bed, you know, really until morning. So remember, and he finally gets the courage to head downstairs. And when he does, guess who's sitting there? His father.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Sherry. Yeah.
No, Sherry is not there. And the first thing he says to his father is he gets up the courage and he says, where's my mother? And he tends to call her mother in that sort of more sort of mummy or mother. But when he's talking about her, he will often call her my mother, my mother, my mother. Where's my mother? And Jack Boyle says, well, Mummy took a little vacation, Collier. And Collier's like, I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
And he says, you know, don't worry, she's gone before. She'll be back in a couple of days. You know, don't worry about it. Collier freaks out. He says, I'm in an absolute blind panic. So he's clever enough to go and get his mum's address book with the phone numbers. Because remember in those days, that was our Bible or your mum's Bible. It was like everyone's contact details was written in a, I don't know, whatever form you had at your house, but, you know.
My mum's diary, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
From 1993, which we used to contact everyone when she passed
away.
Correct,
yeah. So he goes and grabs his mother's phone book. He then races up to a bathroom where he can lock the door and he starts calling his mum's friends. And he tells them what he has heard. So he says, Mum is gone. Last night I woke up to a scream and 2 thuds, and then Dad was creeping around the house. You need to call the police. So he calls all her best friends. Have you seen her? Dad's saying Mum's gone away.
He's
Where
amazing.
Is she?
This
Yep.
kid's, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the friends, at least, I don't know if several of them do, but they do call the police. So the police arrive the next day on New Year's Day. And when they get there, Dr. Jack, whatever, is very, very relaxed. He's fine. He's not that bothered. Welcomes them in. Come on in.
Guys, what can I do for you?
Yeah, what's happening? Why are you here? Oh, right. Oh, yes. Okay. And he says that, yes, there was an argument. And he said, but, I was asleep downstairs on the sofa. And then she came down, this morning furious and threw all these credit cards at me. And then she stormed out. He said, there was no conversation or something. He said, but, she left. And they said, well, where did she go? And he said, well, there was a car waiting for her at the end of the driveway. And she got in the car. I don't know where she's gone or who she's with.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, oh, okay. And they said, well, is that usual? And he's like, oh, yeah, she's always coming and going kind of thing. She's already we are getting divorced. We're just spending the holidays together. So it's totally normal. Like, it's exactly what she'd do. But who called you? He was really interested in who called police. And Collier says his dad kept looking at him the whole time because he didn't know that he'd done that with the phone book.
Technically,
and unfortunately,
not Collier.
Yes, the police say some of her girlfriends have called. So he was like, oh, okay. But at that point, nobody.
None of your business, mate. If sorry, this is 89. Yeah, all right. But in this day and age, the police shouldn't say we've had a report from Paul Clark, or it should just be we've just had a report.
Yeah. So I don't know if they said it was just a friend or whatever else. So Collier can sense in himself that he's in real danger, but nobody suspects anything. And the police leave the scene. They're like, yeah, nothing. No one didn't investigate anything. It's all like whatever.
There we go. Standard. Nothing to see here. Runaway wife,
Yes.
They do it all the time, those wives.
That's exactly right. So Collier is distraught at the thought of what's happening. And I don't know if there's Lieutenant David, I think his name's Messmore. He goes to the house. And I don't know if that's also on January 1 or if it's slightly after. I'm a little bit confused by that because, as I said, no one was suspecting anything, but I don't know that he was there that initial day or if Collier kept calling or somebody kept calling. Somebody said something, but the police didn't suspect anything. Anyway, at some point, Lieutenant David Messmore arrives at the house and Collier says to him in this really earnest way, my mother would never leave me. I just know that she wouldn't. And he said there was something about the boy that was really, he said he was just so alert and so...
switched on. Yeah.
However, his grandmother was in the same room at the same time and she totally discounted what Collier was saying. Her name is Christine Boyle, so she was the mother of Dr. John.
Yeah.
But she actually had been staying in the house that night because they'd obviously all been together for Christmas. And she did say that she had heard a bit of a commotion, but she had nothing more to say on that. And then she added, well, it's totally like Noreen to leave. You know that she actually left during the holidays about 3 years ago. She left for a night or two and then just turned up the next day. So, yeah, she's done this. She's got form. And at that point, they were like, oh, okay. But Collier wouldn't sort of let it go. No. And
he's extraordinary, this child.
Oh.
Yeah. He has this sort of feeling that he'd like to speak to Collier. And they do get a warrant to go back based on what I don't know. That would be helpful if I knew that. But when they go back to the house, Collier is becoming increasingly desperate and he's trying to speak to Messmore. And he says, look, I know your grandmother's nearby. I'm just going to try and she's not going to let anything happen. So he very discreetly gives him a business card and says to him, when you can, just call me. Because what's happened is when they've gone in and, I know where I've got that wrong, sorry. They'd already been in before when they had the warrant. That was when he first saw them. And because they found nothing, he was not allowed to go back to the house. So it was only trying to work out how he was going to get this child to get in contact with him. So Collier tells him what happened that night. He'd said to him he'd heard the scream, he'd heard the thuds, and he said he was just so aware of time and what had happened the next morning, and it wasn't right. He was been with his dad, and his dad had been awful to his mum, and they'd been fighting and whatever else. So he's like, I just feel like there's something there, but I just got to find out how I'm going to get to this child. So he gives him the business card when he can. Anyway, it's at school that Collier goes to the principal and he says to him, you need to call the police department for me. I need to speak to this guy. Anyway, luckily, the principal listens to him and they call David Messmore.
That's because he wasn't a 14, 16, 52 or 26-year-old woman who said that they had been kidnapped and raped. Because no one's going to listen to them.
No, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And when he gets on the phone, Collier has all these ideas and he's saying to him, what's happening on your end? What's happening with the investigation? What can you do? And he's sort of like, well, our hands are tied. We've been to the house. There's nothing there. And he's like, I think Mum's in the house. Yeah. You would have thought so. He said, I'm going to go upstairs when I get home tonight and I'm going to go through, there's a wardrobe and I think Mum could be in the wall behind the wardrobe. And he's like talking like kind of a bit crazy. So I'm going to do that. And he's saying, hey, Collier, just take it easy. He said, look, I know I'm going to go through Mum's purse. Mum has left a purse here I know that which purse she would take and she hasn't taken that one. And he's just got all these things going through his head, which are, I know my mum. Yeah, this is not what my mother would do. So, he says he's going to do it anyway.
And he's right.
He does that. Yeah, he's unsuccessful. I don't think he finds anything behind the wardrobe.
Yeah.
But
didn't find Narnia.
It's becoming increasingly scary for him to be in the house, and his dad
and unsafe,
leaves.
Surely unsafe.
Yeah. So his dad leaves the house at this point. So remember, in the US, the school holidays are not like, they don't have a big summer holiday. It's obviously the middle of winter, and they don't have a big Christmas holiday. They get some time off for Christmas,
I know,
but not a lot,
sucks
right?
To be in the US, I feel sorry for them.
So he's probably back at school pretty early on. Yeah. But the dad leaves, and he's off to Erie, Pennsylvania, which is where they are. And I don't know who they are or he's moving to. What? Or he's bought a house. He's got a house there. So he's going to work on the house. Now, what I find interesting about this is, I don't know how you'd position that if you're running the biggest sort of most successful medical practice in Mainsville. I don't know why you'd be going to Erie. And it's the next state across. It's in Pennsylvania. So,
but how far is that really?
It's not terribly far. It's 2.5 hours.
Oh,
so it's not huge far. But I don't understand what the purpose of that house will be for. If it's not clear on whether because he's talking about the house, whether he's going to that house to start a new life, to set up to have the kids with him when they're getting divorced. Don't know. But anyway, he's told his wife that's where he's going. His mother. Because she's looking after the children. So Christine Boyle looks after the children. I think it's for a weekend or so. And off he goes. So the kids are at school. Dad's away. Dad returns. And when Dad returns, he at some point asked Collier to give him a massage. He said, oh, my God, my shoulders are so sore. I'm aching all over and whatever else. So Collier tells David Messmore, the detective Messmore, that his dad had asked it. And he said, my dad's never asked me to do that before. That's quite strange. He's like, oh, this is all very odd. I don't know. And he says to Collier, I think you just need to be very careful about, how active you are in trying to find it. Please be very, very careful. If what you think is correct, your dad could be very, very dangerous. So please try and be at least subtle and be very cautious of what you do. It's around this point that he has a little bit of a stroke of luck. So his dad's in the gas station, and while he's in the car, Collier finds photographs in the center console. And the photographs are of his dad and Deirdre Chambers. What a coincidence. Sherry,
yeah.
At a house, inside a house, a new house, and outside a house turns out in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Is it a lake house? Because that's on the Lake Erie.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't say. It might be.
I wasn't making a joke about that. I just meant that.
No, it is.
When you were saying, I don't know why he's building that house and whatever. So
it might be a holiday house. Yeah,
Erie's
it's a big house.
Lake Erie. Yeah. So I just wondered whether it was a holiday house.
It's a very big house, and the only photographs I've seen is surrounded by snow. So who knows? Because remember, we're in the middle of winter. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it can't be on a lake. Because, you'd get everything up there. So here are these photos of Dr. Jack and Sherry.
She wearing like a little snow bunny type thing. Yeah. No, shame.
No.
Is she Titty McFantastic?
I don't even know, actually. I'll tell you what she is in a minute, but anyway, we'll get to that.
A scrag?
So it's at this point he lets Detective Messmore know about the photographs? And he's like, oh my God, okay. Anyway, so they start doing a bit of research and they find a real estate agent and a hardware shop, and they also get another tip off. Somebody else, maybe it's a friend of hers, someone calls and says, hang on a tick. Now that I think about it, I remember seeing Dr. Boyle up very early on New Year's Day, like really early, up and about. So it's starting to sort of close in a little bit. So somehow Dr. Jack gets tipped off that someone's talking about this, because one of the things is a lot of people, certainly people who are his patients, they don't want to believe that he's capable of doing anything wrong.
True.
No.
Yeah.
So he's got people, in terms of public opinion, it's quite a shift from being the respected doctor to a potential someone murdering your wife or knocking her off, or your wife's run away from you even. They don't know what's gone on at this point. So it could have really been anybody. But he gets spooked and he tells Collier, we're leaving for Florida tomorrow. And I don't know how I don't know how this kid does it, but again, he somehow gets in touch with a detective and says, my dad's taking us to Florida. And he's like, no, he's not. So at that point, I don't know what CPS is. I think it's Child Protective Services.
Protection, yeah.
They are able to get them involved to try and get him out of the situation. And on, I think it's quite late, I think it's actually January 24th, so this is, several weeks later, Collier wakes up and he's greeted by the detectives and the CPS coming in and saying, okay, you've got 20 minutes to pack a bag. You're coming with us. We're going to take you somewhere else. Yeah. And it's at the same time that they are in the we've got the detective working
such a
with
young child. This is extraordinary.
Sources in Erie, Pennsylvania, and they get in touch with the real estate agent. And the real estate agent is the lady who sold the house to the couple. And so when they approach her and she starts, they show her the photographs of Noreen and Dr. Jack Boyle. And she's like, oh, no, that's not the woman I saw. The woman I saw was pregnant and much, much, much younger. Then they were able to show her the pictures that were sourced by young.
He started his new life.
Collier.
Yeah, Collier. Yeah.
And then when his wife said, I'm not really happy that you're starting a new life, he said, well, I'll just end yours. Anyway.
I don't even know if it was that. I just think he lost it. Oh, I don't even know. Maybe just lost his temper. Why did he do it? There's no reason. He's out. She's the one who's asked for the divorce, remember? They were just spending the holidays together, probably for the kids and family, because, it was sort of like, well, we weren't they? Because I think everyone was going to kind of start afresh. But what gets quite interesting when they speak to the real estate agent, so they say to her, she identifies the fact that it's actually the doctor and Sherry, it's not the doctor and Noreen who are here. And she said, they were a little bit strange. And she said, he was so persistent. We had to have the house totally empty, totally ready to go for January 1. It had to be empty. It was a non-negotiable. And the other thing he thought to ask was, can you tell me what sits beneath the basement? What's the
substructure?
Yes. What would I go into if I went underneath the basement floor?
Sorry, when did he buy this house? And when was he asking this question?
In the latter part of 1989. So just fairly recently. And when this woman's giving her testimony about this, what she was asked, and they said, and what did you say to that? And she said, I said, why? Of course, why?
Yeah.
Why do you need to know?
I just thought I'd dig into it.
What did he say?
Well, I don't know what he said. That was not available to me.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, they've said that quite often
prevaricate.
when there is a crime, and this is so true, it's very wise to check out all the hardware stores. So they start approaching all the hardware stores in the vicinity. Has someone bought a shovel?
Bin bags, bleach.
Killer kits,
Not even a kill kit, but
no
they're
one had.
included.
No one had. However, someone had hired a jackhammer.
The jackhammer, yes. Brilliant.
That'll do it too.
Yeah. So all of this together, of course, they start to put a pitch together, and they then go to the house in Erie, Pennsylvania. And when the detective gets in there, he takes a team and he said, I've got a big group of guys working with me. He said, we get to the basement. He said, it's already been renovated. He said, it's perfectly inhabitable. There's nothing to see. They start to look around, and one of the investigators with him comes over and says, actually, it's different over here. The substance is slightly different. He said, what do you mean? He goes, he said, it's not as set. It hasn't been
Fresh
done all that
concrete.
long ago. It hasn't been done all that long ago. And he's like, okay. And he said, but
still got a little bit of that damp look about it.
Yeah. But above it, there's like a bookshelf, there's carpet, like the whole thing's been totally decked out. Like it's not like they've walked into a raw kind of basement. It has been sealed. There's been carpet. I don't know if there was carpet over the entire thing. Bookshelves put in. It is a renovated room. So Detective Messmore says, right, lift it all up.
Certainly makes you suspicious of every person who says, come and look at my new renovation.
Well, I know, right? Because, you'd really want something like this for your house.
Mm.
And sure enough, when they dig in, they find a body.
Oh.
And that body is naked and it is wrapped in plastic and there's a bag over the head and it has decomposed significantly, so they're not able to tell who it is.
So what date's this that they found it?
It might be the 24th or 25th of January. So 3 and a bit weeks.
Yes, a short period of time to. I mean,
I
I know
impressive
bodies
for an interstate,
but I know bodies decompose relatively quickly. But that anyway,
in very cold weather, I don't quite know.
That's surprising.
How that. Okay. So it's not that it's terrible.
I assume you dug into concrete, right? So unless there's some chemical thing happening there, but that's anyway. Because even putting it in concrete, you would think that would cut off the air so that you wouldn't have as much microbial, whatever it's called, decomposition.
Well, you would think.
Just file that one away. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
Clarky just gave me one of his grins, like, yeah, you will. Yeah.
You will one day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see where this file goes.
So they find a body. I mean, it would appear that it would be pretty obvious that it was
Noreen.
However, they can't find a single bit of evidence. There's nothing. There's not a trace of.
Because it's 89.
It's pre-DNA, correct?
Pre-DNA, yeah.
Yeah, so it's pre-anything
Not
that's
even
kind of really
type?
useful. I don't know. I didn't see that. All I know is that they were really struggling with. So they arrested him, and so basically you have a situation where the key witnesses are the children, like Elizabeth and Collier. So they try desperately to find other routes or ways into finding out, how they can convict him, but they don't at that point have they actually don't have like the smoking gun, as it were. Everything suggests that it's Noreen and that's what's happened, because otherwise what a coincidence, Deirdre Chambers, there's a dead woman's body underneath your new home that coincides with your wife disappearing. So it is at that point that Detective Messmore basically approaches Collier and says, look, I'm really worried your dad's going to get away with this based on the fact that we don't have enough to put him away, but your testimony and the fact that you know everything your first-hand witness being there, and your sister's so young, but the sister said, oh my God, I've got to read this out because it's important. The little girl, there's only one quote that I have from the little girl, and it basically is that she thought that her dad was wrapping up her mum like a snowman because she saw the body being wrapped up in the living room.
In the plastic, yeah.
Now, what's quite interesting at this point is, who do you think is rallying around Collier and Elizabeth?
Deirdre Chambers.
No one. This is what really is. I find this very weird. Well, they possibly were. That's fair. They might have been a little bit. In terms of family, Nana Christine Boyle, nothing. She's like, no. You can't do that. You can't. That's not going to happen. You're not going to testify against your father. And then I do not know where Noreen's family are, but no one takes him in. It's actually Detective Messmore that takes him in initially. So I think he went to like some emergency foster care. Then he goes and stays with Detective Messmore. And he was wonderful with him, obviously. He said, this young boy had been through such an incredible trauma, and all he wanted was to do the right thing by his mum and make his mother proud and see it through. But it was at some point that a judge actually said, that arrangement can't continue. You'll need to go into the system. So he then went into the foster system.
Wow.
Can you believe that? So you've just had your gorgeous mum murdered by your dad, and you don't even end up with your own family?
Yeah.
So he then ends up with some foster family, and I kind of am jumping ahead slightly, but he ends up being adopted by George and Susan Siegler, I think their name was. And he ends up having a wonderful life with them, and they were just incredible. But I just can never get past the fact that he ended up being like this child of no one's. Do you know what I mean? Just this little...
He lost everything.
Yeah.
Terribly sad.
Lost his mother and obviously his father, but there was no one else to pick up.
And the sister, nothing to do with the sister. They were separated. She was placed with another family, and there has been zero contact.
Wow.
Zero. He has reached out to her at one point.
She would have been 3 or 4 or something.
She was 3.
Yeah. So
the
3.
other
family probably said we don't want to have anything
we'll
to do
protect
with
him. We don't want.
Also, she
we'll
was
have a whole new life.
adopted, so it's not like it was.
God, for all I know, she may not even know. I don't know. I get the impression that she does and that she's been approached. They must know who she is.
But
But
the whole messy business behind them.
I feel like everybody was doing that. And it's quite sad to hear Collier speak, because so much of his adult life is about trying to do good, trying to do the right thing, trying to make his mum proud. But he's like, I just still can't get over the fact that I was just who was looking
Lost,
after me.
Dumped.
Little boy lost. Yeah. And he was lucky that he was who he was, that he was able to sort of...
He's an extraordinary child. Well, he was an extraordinary child. I don't know what he's like as a grown-up, but he's extraordinary.
Yes.
Not letting that go and just, getting all, like doing the detecting for the detectives.
The awareness of what to do.
So if you're interested, there's a lot of footage available, because it was all filmed, of Collier when he takes the stand.
Oh, wow.
And it's this, as I said, he's if you were going to cast a child in the role of Collier Landry, you would cast this, he's a little bit of you get a little bit of a theatre kid kind of vibe. Like he's articulate, he's sensitive, he's thoughtful, he's beautiful to listen to, he's got a gorgeous voice. I mean, it's incredible that...
You think you might have cast Dean Kane as a child?
Maybe.
Because I looked at a photo of him when he was as a Collier, and I'm like, he's got that sort of young Superman, the TV series.
Yeah, you could do.
Him.
You could see that he was a really beautiful looking child, and depending on how his hair was cut and what weight he was carrying, whatever else, and fashion of the time, he just, I don't know, he was a bit of a... I could only imagine...
You're right about Jason Bateman cross.
Yeah.
Yeah. You nailed it early on.
Yeah. And it was such a big deal in Mansfield. Could you imagine, nothing really happened there. It was like the story of the century, the crime of the century for them. How did their, upstanding... my doctor, the doctor, how did this go from this, that? And so everybody would have had their own personal opinion.
How old was he when it went to trial?
Collier?
Yeah.
He was 12. 19.
Imagine
19.
a 12-year-old taking the stand to testify against his father.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.
He said he talked all about, this sort of who he was at home, how his mum had been. Actually, he said mum was so sad, and so, it was just this awful, awful time. Dad had, and, of course, then apparently the dad tried to discredit the mum and said all this stuff about her. I was like, it was all really textbook. But the father always maintained that up until recently, maintained that he had no involvement, that he didn't kill her. She left.
Oh, he killed her.
I was watching something.
And he buried her in concrete in a basement in his new house with Sherry, the pregnant bird.
Correct.
And then renovated it.
And Sherry then did take the stand as well. They did end up getting her to... Because I don't think she was... Well, she didn't know what was going on. She just thought...
I just thought I was an adulterous bird who was, going to steal the hot doctor off the other lady.
So there's another half-sibling, no contact, nothing to do. Again, So that she had the baby very early on. I think she'd had the baby before they went to
trial.
Yeah.
Because she was pregnant on January 1990. Because it was New Year's Eve, right?
Yes.
And then went to trial in 1990 or 1991.
Yep. So what he'd done was he had killed her, the kids or the little girl had seen something, so that there was that. Collier had heard it, and then he had loaded her body into the trunk of a car. And then remember a few days later where I said that he went on a weekend away? When he went to Airy to the house, that's when he took the body down. And then that was when he'd had his rented jackhammer. And then he did all that sort of work. But I'm presuming he didn't do the cement work. I don't know who did that, but because it sounds like it was a pretty professional job. But yeah.
Well, it's not that hard. This is floor cement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, true.
The thing that gets me about it is he asked the real estate agent, you were saying we have to be in by January 1. It felt premeditated. That's why I was asking you about that.
100%.
Yeah. No,
it's not because you said earlier that maybe he just lost his temper and killed it. It sounded to me like, no, he'd planned to have a place to put her.
Yeah, I think you're right. But how it happened at that exact moment, I don't know. But at 3:15 in the morning, I don't know that she would have been. They wouldn't be up. What would be going on?
At some point between this time and this time, we're going to kill her and put her in there. And it just happened to be that night that it happened. Right? Okay.
Yes. So I think there was a blow to her head. That's what had killed her.
Blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
When you first started the story and said thump thump, I wonder whether it was a gunshot. Like a muted gunshot.
Oh, yeah. So when they go to trial, you can actually see it. There's a documentary which I could not watch because I tried so many different ways. Of course, we're in Australia, we were unable to. And it's a documentary that Collier himself has done. I think it was in 2017.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of jumping around a little bit. But Collier Landry, obviously, his name would have been Boyle. He took his middle name as his last name, so he could distance himself from that. He went to music school in Mansfield, or actually, I don't know if it was Mansfield. I read something they ended up in Ontario, which I don't know if he ended up there or that's where the Zieglers lived, but sort of in the same area, but not necessarily in Mansfield. But anyway, he studied there, studied music, and he said, I didn't actually graduate. I went to LA. And he said, when I went to LA, I wanted to be around the best in the business, and I wanted to be inspired people, and I wanted a new start. I didn't want anyone to know who I was. And he said, and everybody's from somewhere else there. So he didn't really tell people, what had happened to him, come up occasionally. Yeah. But he ended up doing a bit of modelling and this, and he ended up being a cinematographer. Yeah, at different points, he's incredibly good looking.
Yeah.
And he, at one point, he said he had
at different points.
At different points. It changes depending on... Totally. Yeah.
At different points, I'm more...
During COVID, he's got long, crazy hair. He looks like a skater.
Like me, he's had up and down weight.
Yeah.
And, sometimes he looks better than others. But he's a very attractive man.
Yeah, he is. And it's there that he meets, lots of like-minded people. Whatever else, he meets a woman who I think was a director. Anyway, she did the film with him. When they launched it, I would have loved to have been able to see it because he went back to all the people that did help him.
I'll look the principal up later.
Yeah. And there's I've seen the trailers. There's a shot where he's standing in a school hall with, an older teacher kind of thing, and he was the guy who'd helped him contact the police. And so he kind of says it's a thank you to the people in Mansfield, and also a bit of I don't know, not an end, but he's trying to
get
a bit of closure for him and of him. Yeah.
Mm.
But what is really interesting is that he then interviews his father. And again, I've only seen the highlights, I can only see bits of it. But the whole idea of it finishes, the final scene is him talking to his father in prison. He goes to see his dad and he tries to find out why. Now, what is quite interesting is the whole time that the dad was in prison, the Zieglers had been a buffer, and they'd been managing sort of letters, and that had come from the dad. And the dad's relationship with, or his idea of his relationship with Collier would change depending on what he wanted. So manipulative. If he thinks he could help him, I want you to do this. Mm-hmm. If you're no help to me, then you're no use to me.
You're dead to me, yeah.
Collier had sent him a letter at one point, and I have to read how he described it. It was just what he said to this kid. It was unbelievable. So he sends Collier a letter basically saying, your grammar's terrible. I don't want to read a letter from you like that. And you are an unctuous brat.
Yeah, unctuous.
Do you know the word unctuous?
Yep.
Yeah, you're an unctuous brat. you bring shame on our whole family. You just should shut up. So
You're
this is the kind of
ingratiating.
Exactly. This has been happening the whole, and then other times he'd say something to him saying, "I love you," and whatever else. But he just was totally doing it to manipulate him. And he said what was great
because his son sent him notes saying, "I want to love you, Dad." Yeah. And he said, "You're an unctuous brat.
Can you just tell me why you killed my mother?" Yeah. So apparently the Zieglers, the family who adopted him, they were brilliant. They'd take all the stuff that had come from the dad and they'd sit down with him and they'd talk about what he's doing, and that you know what he's like. You know he's trying to manipulate you. Mm-hmm. This is this behaviour. This is that. You don't have to take that on board, whatever else.
Oh, that's good.
And so he does finally go and he meets with his father, and his dad is just... He can't give anything of himself.
Of course he can't, because he's a fucking idiot narcissist prick. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So has he gotten out? Will he get out? Where are we at with all of that? Well, he has been in front of the parole board, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 times now based on where we're at. But he is serving a life sentence, plus he also got an extra 18 months for...
Attempted escape.
Something with the corpse.
Desecration of a corpse.
Renovating with a corpse.
They didn't use the word
interfering with corpse.
Yeah, it's like that. I don't think it was desecrated, but it was like interfering with a corpse. You got the 18 months for. I was sort of like, oh God, it doesn't seem like much. You can go and do what you like to a corpse.
Interfering with a corpse sounds
sexual, but it's not that. I think maybe it was just moving it or just burying it when you didn't have permission to do so.
Going right back to 1994, so he was jailed in 1990. While he was serving the life sentence, he appealed, saying that there was insufficient evidence, and his family supported him the whole way through doing that.
Because they're also narcissists.
Yeah. He also said that he was trying to implicate the fact that it wasn't right that there was a relationship between the detective and his son, and that he'd been sort of coerced into being a witness, and how that was sort of, he was calling it I can't say the word.
Prosecutorial.
That's the word.
Misconduct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And saying there was ineffective assistance of counsel. The court affirmed the district court's denial of the writ, finding the evidence sufficient and the claims of trial and prosecutorial errors unfounded.
I mean, I get where he's coming from.
Yeah.
I do. But back to your point about who was there for the kid. The kid was lost and abandoned.
No one.
In a system.
Nobody.
Maybe it shouldn't have been the detective to help. It should have been someone else, social services, etc. But also, that's all after the fact.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Also, back then, police sometimes did have that role.
Your dead wife in your basement.
Yes, freshly covered 3 weeks after she went missing. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
We found your dead wife in your new house.
In your house's basement.
That you bought in that basement, and you hired a jackhammer. I don't think that your son and his relationship with the detective had much to do, because that all formed after you put your wife's body in a basement.
Imagine living oh God.
Well, I know you hung up on the other state, but it's like, for me, it's the holiday house thing, like
the chances of her being in that house in another state.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
There's no coincidence.
Deirdre Chambers,
there.
what a coincidence.
True. Sherry did it. Anyway, no. Right.
So he also went up for the parole board in 2010, where a release at this time would not further the interest of justice and would demean the seriousness of the brutal crime, and then again in 2020. And it's interesting because it's only fairly recently that he's finally said that, yes, he might have been involved and there might have been an accident.
I might have been involved.
I mean,
30 years
I
can't really remember, but I may have had something to do with it.
There was
what
some thuds.
A fucking asshole.
That is the story of, it's either the story of Dr. John F. Boyle Jr., Jack Boyle, but it's possibly more the story of his son, Collier Landry. And honestly, if you look up Collier Landry, there is just a plethora. He's got a very large sort of social platform now, and he helps people through, podcasts, and he appears to be on lots of different things where he talks about his own experience, and then a lot of things are sort of post-traumatic stress disorder. God, I can't get the words out.
PTSD, yeah.
Yeah, that he has suffered as a result of, basically hearing his mother being murdered. But he's trying to do good things. And, he says that what he likes to hear, and, lots of people that sort of spoke that I've, heard spoke who are obviously on his side and are supporters of his say, he just wants to make his mum proud and he was not the kind of kid who was just going to sit back and go, oh, never mind, I'm going to be a victim. He really put himself in quite significant danger, really, given what his father was capable of, and given his dad's. We've looked at a lot of crimes where somebody's public persona and where they're sort of put in society helps them become the enemy within, I guess.
Untouchable from the outside.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
So if you're interested, he does do something called Moving Past Murder, which is a podcast that he's created. He delves into his experiences. And as I said, there was the documentary, which I was unable to watch, but tried to steal little bits of it and read some manuscripts, which is called A Murder in Mansfield, which is his ode to his mum and to Mansfield, and the story of his mother's murder and his journey as a result of that. There you go. Collier Landry. Little Mr. 1980s Americana, if I've ever seen one.
Extraordinary kid.
Yeah, really.
Like streetwise isn't the word, but he just knew shit ahead of his time, didn't he? My God.
It's an old soul, one would say.
I reckon you'd be like that, Schmitty.
I don't know if I was like that at 12. I mean, it's running rings around me. Yeah. I didn't have a suspicious nature, but I think when you grow up with someone who he knew had violent, anger issues, when he heard that scream and the thud, I kind of think, well, he wouldn't put it past his father to do something against his mother. So I think because he would have had other experiences, would have said, Dad can be violent, Dad can be aggressive, Dad can be shouty or whatever.
Yes.
To the outside world who were like, no, he was a lovely man, he would have been like, no, he can be not a lovely person.
Yes.
Because that's what you experience when you live within the boundaries of the family.
But again, all of the way that we view people in our day and age, 30 years later, 30 plus years later, 35 years later, is totally different than the way I would have viewed someone back then. I was young, I was a child, but you know what I mean? We're more aware of it now. Just because you're a certain thing on the outside doesn't mean you're behaving like that at home. We're better than we were if someone came out and said there was certain. In those days, I think it'd been a really hard sell, especially if, as I said, 1 in 13 people in the area were his patients.
Yeah. Oh no. I mean,
swaying that opinion, even getting people to contemplate what going on. Yeah.
100%.
And that he was this person at home, and you really have to paint that picture of them understanding what someone who's so narcissistic and I think psychopath.
Horrendous.
Because I think doctors are one of the most trusted professions, aren't they? And so.
I would think so.
Yeah, it'd be really hard for people to get their head around.
That is still the frogs, isn't it?
Yeah. What are the frogs
Just
do?
a minute ago, there was not even that. It went, and I was like, Jesus, it's like the predator is out there. It's coming to get you.
We call them predator frogs because they sound
There's
like
a very good chance for our listeners that I will have muted all of that sound, but because it's quite distracting all the way through this, I'm like, the predator is outside. Listen to it. It's extraordinary.
We wake up in the middle of the night and you can hear them going,
like, it's like a predator.
It's funny. Any discussion on his motivation? Because it just seems...
No, it seems really premeditated, right? That's the bit I don't get.
They were divorcing. It's so...
just getting rid of her.
Unnecessary. Oh. Maybe it was money. because... Or maybe. Ego, because that's why I was laboured the point about him asking the realtor before January 1st that it had to be ready by January 1st. And what's the... that was premeditated totally.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Which means he had a motive that wasn't just, a crime of passion or a moment of anger. He was going to kill her. And to your point, Clarkie, why? I mean, if he's like, we're going to divorce, whatever, unless it was just the ego thing. I don't want the rest of the world to think that she rejected me or I'm a failure in any way.
Maybe he was following through on a promise. Like he'd said to her, if you do that one more time, I'm going to kill you. And she did it one more time.
He had it coming. He had it coming.
Yeah.
He only had himself to blame.
So what punishment do you think?
I'm going to bury him. Yeah, I'm going to bury him in a
that's a good
basement.
one.
I reckon concrete
Yeah.
shoes in a tide that just comes
as it
in
comes
slowly. And I'm not sure whether it'll be the first tide or the second tide that gets to the height that it needs to. Maybe it's, a once a month king tide, or I don't know. But so he just sits there worried for a long time. And
Mine's sort of similar. I mean, I'm going to bury him in a basement, but not fully. And then I'm going to periodically put a plastic bag over his head.
oh yeah, nice.
Until he's almost passed out, and then I'll take it off. But he can't do anything because he's just a head out of concrete that every now and then gets a little bit suffocated.
Plastic bag over it. Jeepers.
Yeah.
You won't give him the mattress from last episode?
Swanny?
Oh, did you hear that one, Swanny?
I did. Nice
maybe
touch.
in his current prison, he can have the mattress from the last episode.
And the visits every day.
From Bubba, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very hard to sort of imagine what would truly, like, how I like a psychological nut punch. It's hard because remember, the doctor, of course, he was disbarred. What do you call it when you're disbarred in medical profession? What's that called? Struck off.
Struck off, yeah. Right.
Struck off. He was struck off, obviously, immediately. So he's no longer a doctor. So I would imagine that would be not great for someone like that. But surely seeing his son's success, and if he thinks he probably doesn't even think it's success. I don't know. That's the problem. I would like for him to see his son really succeed and really be loved and have, a wonderful family life. And that he has been left with nothing. No one's on his side. No one believes him. He is just rots on his own. And no one he's just
no one cares. But what if Noreen, we bring her, somehow we bring her back, and she raises Elizabeth and Collier and marries again and is happy, and they all do not have this trauma.
Yeah.
And on some parallel universe, Dick Face in the concrete that I put him in can just watch that. Yeah. And Sherry's gone on with her life. She doesn't have Sherry's gone on. Baby
and their child has got a fabulous stepfather, and everyone's happy.
And no one remembers him.
Yes.
And no one cares about him.
I think that's important.
Can see it play out, but he's absolutely no one in these people's lives. And they're all happy, and they're much better off without him.
Yes, because I think if there's a downside to Collier having this public profile and the fact that he talks about it so much is that through infamy his dad becomes, something.
Gives his father a profile.
And I sort of think, I don't think he deserves that. Don't give him the time. Don't give him the screen time. Yeah. He just needs to be just ignored and forgotten and, pushed aside while everybody goes on to having well-adjusted,
really good
fulfilling lives. Yeah. That would make me happy.
Thanks, Swanny. And as we say every week, miss you already. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine. Or visit our website, www.trialbywine.com, to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.